So someone just asked me about load and how to determine load and non-load bearing walls. Walls, I took a wall out at this location. And let's go from here. Well, this is apparently load bearing, right? Well, you can't tell. You can't tell. Well, what's the load? You have to ask yourself. What happens if I remove the wall? What would happen? Well, the ceiling would fall. Huh. What's connected to the ceiling? Oh, right, it's ceiling. The ceiling has ceiling joists in it. Huh. Then you go up there, what happens if I go into the attic? And you would ask yourself, what happens if I remove the ceiling joist? Oh, it looks like the ceiling joist is holding up the roof. Well, then you can't remove the ceiling joist, can you? So you would have to see what the load path is going on. What is on top of this? What's on top of this? Not necessarily what's below it at this point. If you want to remove this wall, you want to see what it's holding. What is the wall holding? And so this is where you would go into your attic and look for if it is actually has some type of supports going to the ceiling, to the rafters, etc. Now, if the floor joists cross each other, if they cross each other, floor joists are in the attic at that point. That would be ceiling joists as we look at them. But as you walk on them in the attic, they might be considered floor joists, right? So it's one and the same in this case. They will cross, if they cross each other up on top of this wall, this wall then becomes load bearing. You can consider it load bearing. Let me give you a quick drawing. So here's a quick drawing. As you go into your attic, you'll probably see plywood here, so it'll be pretty hard if it's a floor joist, right? If it's a ceiling joist, you're going to be walking on top of those ceiling joists. If it's floor joist, then you'll see a floor. So I guess I could add more clarity to that for you on floor joist versus ceiling joist. Now, if this is the wall we just looked at, that I just showed you a minute ago. If you get into your attic, this is you will see drywall insulation here, or whatever you may see here. If you see the ceiling joists crossing each other and meeting at your wall, so you would drill a hole up in your wall from here to locate it, and I'll show you that in a minute. But you would drill a hole up in your wall to locate this, drop down a wire, do what you have to do, put a flashlight up there, whatever you have to do to see if it's on top of this wall. If it's on top of this wall and you remove this wall, well, then your floor joists are not going to be able to hold the ceiling, your ceiling joist or floor joist, however it's lined up, however you have what's going on. They'll just fall down. Now they might have nails through them here or whatever to hold them together. That's not enough. Consider that not enough to hold it. So this is I'm taking liberty here, making one smaller than the other so you can see with more detail. It doesn't matter if it has nails in it. Do not remove this. I'm not saying you cannot. There are situations you surely can, depending if it's like a closet and a span, and you know, you would have to know unsupported spans and how this connection was made then. But we're not at that point, because as long as you see them going across that wall, then it's going to be status non gratis, meaning do not remove it. Now, I'll give you an amateur view of how to do this without getting into the attic. To see if it's load bearing, it can be dangerous. What you're going to do is you'll just use a Sawzall and cut this material. If you cut this material out with a Sawzall, reciprocating saw, and the wood binds down on top of your reciprocating saw at any point, well, that's because there's loads above transferring down into your blade. Now, here's the problem with what I just said, is that structures have a lot of hidden redundancy, if you will, hidden that you would not know. For example, if there was plywood on the floor above, you cut this one, and the floor joist could be from this one to this guy. Say they were spacing with floor joist, floor joist, floor joist, or it would be ceiling joist, ceiling joist, ceiling joist. You go to cut this guy out, you see no binding. You're like, oh, it's great, this is not load bearing. Well, not true. The plywood is bridging and holding from this joist to this one, is bridging and holding up the support above, where you don't see it cutting through the materials. So well, you don't see it binding up until you start removing all the materials, and you think you're still good to go. And then ultimately the structure creeps down and falls on your head in the middle of the night. So that is just the amateur way of doing it, I was saying, which is totally wrong. I think I've seen a couple of shows talk about that. You need to evaluate what's above. What's above, that's insulation there. This gets a header put back in, and it will resolve if you guys see the issue here. One ceiling's higher than the other. Well, if you put a header in here, a boxed header, and come across, it will stop smoke from coming from this kitchen side, and it will curl around and keep it on that side if you drop down a nice size header. Also, it will resolve the different levels where you don't want to try to patch that and look like trash, especially with the different textures here. So this is my video response for someone. This is the fast version of it. I can show this and, you know, gosh, hundreds of different combinations of where you need to evaluate each one individually. So that was non-load bearing, that wall we were at. And that's the size of that. So you find the end of the rafter where the rafter rests on, and you can determine, well, is my wall there? If you're not sure, drill a hole. Drill a hole there, drywall hole, 1 inch, half inch drywall hole, whatever you have to do. Drop a wire down there, flashlight so you can see the light, and you'll be able to line up where your wall system, where your supports end. So now we're here, and there's an cut opening there. No big deal because it's got one joist is not supported. I did not do that. I don't know the intent of that at this time. But now you see, if you come up to the attic, you'll see this huge spacing, and this appears to be supporting a joist along with this 2x material turned flatly, if you will, on a flat, turned on the, well, not quite flat. Just, you see the angle there. So you get what I'm trying to get across to you. Turned on the same angle as the rafters. But is this a load-bearing wall? It is not. It is not. They put these little cripplers in here, these little, for whatever reason, decoratively. It's decorative because there's not one, or this is not a header. There's not one under each one of these rafters. So this is decorative. You could pull these out. Now, before you do that, each one of these individual ones, if you need to follow up, make sure you don't have a skylight or something of more load. In this case, this is insulated panel, reflective panel, to make sure there's no skylight between this guy and this guy before you pull it out, because that would help transfer the loads down. So skylight would be your next question in reference to this, not this. These are all fair game to remove. This one is not fair game because it's transferring the load from that rafter, or relieving some of the load from that rafter, even though it's offset. So you would have to put it back, and if there was a skylight there, that was something of additional loading. But I don't want to go down this too far for you. But again, that's your unsupported span. So this is non-load bearing. There is no skylight here on this side. So I can literally say that this is fair game to remove these guys. There was probably a decorative panel that went here, so they could keep this this area here as a you see these hardwood floors up here, as a real storage and moving place. I don't want to show more. I had to pull back some. We ran wires. We had to tear back some flooring. Terminating video. Hope this was educational for you today. Well, please don't be afraid to ask questions.